Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the life and letters of the Apostle Peter. And in order to keep this around 5 minutes, I'm going to be doing shorter sections. I pretty much made it to 5 minutes yesterday and only had a few verses. So today we're going to be in 1 Peter chapter 3, and we're going to be looking at verses 13 through 18. Yesterday, the Apostle Peter is transitioning from those specific instructions about dealing with each other and all of our different social relationships to thinking clearly about our relationship with Jesus, especially in the moment of persecution, by saying in verse 8, let us, to sum everything up, let everything be harmonious, sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted, humble in spirit, not returning evil for evil, and reminding himself and us of the things Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mount. And then there was that long quote from Psalm 34, the psalm that David wrote after he had escaped from Saul in Jerusalem. Well, I guess he wasn't in Jerusalem yet, but after he escaped from Saul and he ran to Gath and escaped from Gath, and then he wrote this song, Psalm 34, in which he says, if you want to survive and thrive, you got to do these things. You got to speak the truth. You got to turn from evil and do good. You've got to seek peace and pursue it because God's watching, and he's going to be for the righteous and against those who do evil. So let's read verses 13 through 18. And who is there to harm you if you prove zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for the sake of righteousness, you are blessed, and do not fear their intimidation, and do not be troubled. And then he goes on to say, and that, which is from Isaiah chapter 8, by the way, and sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone, or to give an answer to everyone who asks you, interrogates you, to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence, and keep a good conscience, so that in the thing in which you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. For it is better, if God should will it so, that you suffer for doing what is right, rather than for doing what is wrong. For Christ also died for sins once for all, the just for the unjust, in order that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh and made alive in the spirit. Now that's in the middle of a sentence, but we're going to stop there because the next sentence takes a lot of explaining. Okay. He says, if you do good, you should not be treated unfairly, but you might be. And even if you are, it doesn't mean that you change your tactics. It doesn't mean you change your tactics. Don't be afraid of anything. Reacting with violence is another way of expressing fear. It just is. The person who does what Jesus says, who doesn't hit back and doesn't back down, is the person who isn't afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be troubled. If you're going to do this, you have to sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts. Now, that word sanctification, to sanctify, to make clean for holy purposes, is what happens to us, not to Jesus. Jesus is holy. But he, in a singularity, uses this word to describe our relationship with Jesus. You have to sanctify Jesus. Their eyes would have popped open. That's what Jesus does for us. That's what the Spirit does. That's not what we do for him. Sanctify Christ as Lord in your heart. You have to set him apart as Lord in your heart, or this ain't going to happen. And when they come to interrogate you, and make no mistake, that's what he's talking about, you be ready to give them an answer. Your life should have already spoken for you. The people who slander you and falsely accuse you, it can be proved that you are a law-abiding citizen, a model citizen. And when they talk to you about what you believe about Jesus, you tell them exactly what you believe. And don't be afraid to. But you say that with gentleness and with reverence, not belligerently, and not in any way disrespectfully to others or to God, because to be disrespectful to others is to be disrespectful to God. If you've got to do this, and you might, in fact, he tells them in chapter 4, don't be surprised. This has happened always to God's people. It's something Jesus points out at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. That's okay, because Jesus did this for us once for all. It's better to to empathize with Jesus, to share in Jesus' sufferings, than to get out of those sufferings in some way defame or deny the gospel of Jesus Christ. Okay. He's going to talk about the victory that Jesus had, which is ours as well, tomorrow. But it's been more than 5 minutes, a few seconds past, so I'll say goodbye to you for today, and we'll pick up at the end of chapter 3 tomorrow. Thank you for joining me for 5 good minutes.